and welcome everyone. I am Erica Desper, founder of the Center for Confident Parenting, but tonight I'm here just as a mom. Well, not just a mom, but you know what I mean. A mom who's been on a very long journey with our own son, who is now 14, heading into ninth grade. We started this journey of trying to get adequate diagnoses and support for him in first grade. And we're just getting it now. We just got it at the end of 8th. So I am on a mission to try to get as much information and resources to other families as possible in an effort to make their journey just less brutal than ours was maybe a little more concise and streamlined. And to that end, I've invited two awesome advocates to answer your questions and get you on the right path or a better path as we head back to school this September of 2024. So thank you for joining, for watching, and I hope this is helpful for everybody. Lots of parents have submitted questions in advance, so we will get to those. And I'm going to kick it over to Melissa. You can introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Yelito. I am an advocate, and I'm also the founder of My Advocacy, LLC. Just a little bit of background. I am a former educator. I taught in the Baltimore City Public School System and also the Downingtown Area School District. And then once I had my two little ones, I got into educational advocacy. So I've been doing this for about 3.5 years, and I'm super passionate about helping families find their voice at the IEP table, making sure that all of their concerns are addressed, that they feel well educated and informed about their rights, and just truly understand what supports are out there for their child and what resources and things that they could be getting. And joining me also is another wonderful advocate, Dana. I will kick it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Melissa. I'm Dana Emery. Also a prior educator, worked as a regular education teacher, special education teacher, special education department manager in a couple actually of our Chester County districts. And so I have over 15 years experience in education. And so I support my families as an education consultant and advocate. So really working toward trying to get in there, be part of the team, try and see things that maybe the current team hasn't necessarily thought of. Kind of like Melissa said, thinking about things that and supports that the child might need that hasn't been implemented yet, and just kind of making sure that that communication between the school team and the parents is really robust and allowing the parents to be heard, and then also the parents to be able to understand what the school is trying to communicate to them. So really coming in, trying to be a part of the team to try and get things done without having to get to a point where it becomes more of an issue down the road.
I should say you are not Dr. Kristen Meyer, although we're happy to have you. I did promise that Kristen would be here. She got pulled away to a scheduling conflict at the last minute. So thank you so much for being willing to step in.
Yeah, so Kristen Meyer and we co-founded and own the Reach Group, which is an educational consulting advocacy business that we founded together. So we are entering into our second year here doing the advocacy piece, and just super excited to be here to answer these questions.
And Dana, did we want to start with a little back to school tip? I forgot to add that on to my introduction. I think the tip, yeah, the tip that I want to share with families was it is never too soon to reach out to your child's IEP team, just to kind of, if you have a new case manager, of course, new teachers, introduce yourself, share some information about your child, share what your goals are for your child for the school year, just kind of open the lines of communication. Include their case manager, their classroom teacher or teachers if they're in middle or high school, possibly include that supervisor or special education, any of the therapists working with their child, just really kind of bring everyone together. And just initiate that first contact, and really just show that you're willing to work with the team and I guess model that homeschool communication that you are likely really wanting from your child's IEP team.
Yes, I definitely second that. And in addition, I think it's really important to get that IEP out, take a look at your child's goals, and just get really familiar with them. Definitely know how the school is monitoring those goals. So when you get your first progress report, you can really digest that and understand whether or not your child's making progress in their goal areas. And if you have questions or you aren't sure how they're monitoring progress, definitely the beginning of the year is the time to connect with your school team to let them know that you have questions or are uncertain or unsure. Definitely better to do that in the beginning of the year than when you get your first progress report. So that would definitely be my tip.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And Megan just joined us live. Thank you, Megan. Feel free to put any questions in the chat. All right, Melissa, I think you have the first question. Did you want me to read it off?
Sure. Just so I'm not talking to myself.
Right? I know. I kind of want to be part of this, but I have
Yeah.
nothing technically useful to add aside from my parent experience. I do not consider myself an expert in it. So Nicole has an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and she says, my son has ARFID. There's actually a typo, but we're going to assume that she's saying ARFID, which for anyone who doesn't know, you can fill us in on what it is for anyone who doesn't know. Would you be familiar with the type of supports he can get at school with this disorder?
Sure. So for anyone that does not know, ARFID is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So essentially, children that it's a medical diagnosis. So children that are diagnosed with ARFID typically struggle to eat a variety of different foods. They usually have a few safe foods, but are unwilling to expand beyond those safe foods for a few different reasons. One of the main reasons could be, a fear of choking, like the swallowing and the gag reflex. Another reason could be sensory texture with the food. So these kids typically have just a few foods that they will eat. It could cause some difficulties with getting the right nutrients into their bodies because they are only willing to eat a few different foods. So in terms of in the educational environment, supports that are available to students, and this is really kind of where we walk the fine line between educational supports for a medical disability. But there are options. So if the child, I see this a lot, not just with children with autism, but I do see it more often with children diagnosed with autism. If they are placed in an autistic support program where there is some, I guess, one-to-one teaching going on within the structured teaching environment, they can incorporate kind of exposure to different foods within the school day. I've seen it addressed in that way. I have also seen schools bring in a feeding therapist when appropriate. It depends on the district. It's so I don't want to give a cut and dry answer because it really depends on the team and it depends on the district. Also, another consideration is how much RFID is impacting your child in the educational environment. So if you're able to send in safe foods for your child and they're able to participate in snack time and in lunchtime and get the nutrients and participate in their day, and you have them in outside feeding therapy, they may not need a whole lot of extra instruction or support in school. There may be some accommodations in the IEP, things like that, but they may not need, a super robust system in place to address that medical piece of RFID.
Yeah, and that's important to know. Like, not everything gets accommodated at school, so it kind of just depends how it's impacting the child and their education.
Yeah, and I would say, just be upfront with the team. I was saying before we started recording, this has popped up a lot with my kids that are transitioning from early intervention into kindergarten. And just being transparent with the team going in, like, hey, my kid will only eat these 3 foods and they have to be microwaved. Do you have access to a microwave? What will this look like? Or my kid is used to being distracted while eating, or they need to graze, they aren't going to sit for a meal. How can we set this up so that they're successful in school? Can we please have a written plan put into the IEP so that everyone is on the same page? And, you as the parent can feel comfortable sending them to school on the first day, knowing that everything is set up for them to be supported.
Exactly. I know lunch, my son does not have this diagnosis, but the lunch environment and the noise and pace and transitions involved, he just did not eat for like the first semester. So I can imagine someone who's already struggling in that area just having a really hard time. So that's a great question. Thank you, Melissa. All right, now we're over to Dana. And Elena with a 13-year-old says, I've been trying to get my other twin boys speech and language support since 2nd grade. So technically a statement, not a question, but I turn that over to you, Dana.
So I would say if you have concerns about your child's speech and language, then the best route to go would be to write a request for testing to the special education director and the principal of the building. And in that letter, your request should state something along the lines as to how is this impacting your child's access to education and impacting them academically. The district either needs to say okay and sends you a permission to evaluate, or they would send you a notice of recommended educational placement saying that they would not be testing your child and explain why. And then you can respond with your approval of that document by indicating whether or not you agree with not testing. And so, and if you get to that point, then I would definitely try and reach out to Melissa or myself and get some guidance if you still feel like you're hitting a roadblock. But like Melissa had mentioned with ARFID, some diagnoses are met and worked with and others are not. So if if your child is intelligible and people can understand what it is that they're saying, and they're potentially 13 years old and they don't want to leave class to go to try and work on their R sound, there's just other factors sometimes that come into play. So it really is communicating with your child when they're 13, along with the school team and the school supervisors, just to get an idea of how to move forward.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we're up to Christina's question. I'm not sure how to read this. I don't know if she has, well, the question's about her 9-year-old, so let's just leave it at that. But I think she has other kids who are other ages. But she says, my 9-year-old has ADHD, no official IEP. As previous teacher, easily made accommodations, but I'm concerned. Where do I start? That is for you, Melissa.
Okay. So I'm assuming the parent had concerns, the child is likely struggling. The teacher was probably making some accommodations within the classroom to support the child. I see this often, and that's not to say that there are some teachers out there trying so hard to support all of their students and doing all the best practice accommodations that need to be done before even moving forward with an evaluation. So I think I would first ask, what do these accommodations look like? Are they going above and beyond where they're modifying work? I guess I would just be curious about what the accommodations are. Are they pulling him to the student to the back table because that's something that they could do for any student? Or are they giving them a math test, they're not doing well, so they're letting them take the math test again, and then they're putting the second grade in the grade book, and it's kind of not really reflecting their knowledge. So I would just be curious about what accommodations are being done. I would definitely want to meet with the teacher and express concerns. I would want to be documenting what accommodations are being provided. if the teacher feels that the accommodations are necessary, maybe the school support team, the MTSS team needs to come together and come up with a support plan that needs to be monitored, goals need to be made, data needs to be collected, and then the team needs to reconvene in 8 weeks and see, did the student make progress? Does the team feel an evaluation is necessary? Because, it's great that one teacher is willing to put these accommodations in place, but it's another thing if the kid goes to the next grade and that teacher is not willing, and then is that really setting the child up for success?
Like,
So
and I don't want to interrupt you, but let's pretend I was this parent and I said, what, the documenting what? Like I had a verbal conversation with the teacher. Isn't that good enough?
yeah, no, I would follow everything up in writing. And that's why I would reach out to the MTSS team or the instructional support team. Different schools call them different things. I would possibly, if you don't know what your school's team is called, maybe just loop in the school counselor or the school principal. That would be a good place to start and just have another set of eyes on this, just for.
And by in writing in this day and age, you're meaning email.
Yes.
That we always want to be copying someone else so that they're seeing it. And I'm only saying this, parents, because these are the mistakes that I made that I wish I knew earlier on. So I want everyone to hear it the way I would have heard it back then.
Yes, thank you. Sometimes I say things and I don't.
We all use lingo that means something to us. It doesn't necessarily mean things to everybody else. So I'm trying to listen for that. But no, your answer was great.
Thank you for slowing me down. I appreciate it. But yes, document everything because I guess I would just be curious what the accommodations are, make sure they're documented. If it gets to the point where it's over helping or there are so many accommodations needed, bring in that support team, collect data, and then really have that conversation of, is an evaluation needed? The child has ADHD, so they really could qualify for a 504 plan anyways. Why not get that started and get the accommodations in writing anyways?
And I love this teacher. She's being so sweet and accommodating, but yeah, she's not gonna go with him in future years or even future classrooms because they start to move around.
Right.
Welcome to, I just forgot, but I think Stephanie and Michelle who just joined us. So if you have questions that you didn't get to submit in advance, pop them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on there. And then we are over to Beth, who has an 11-year-old, and Dana, she is asking, what should I do when grades don't correspond to standardized test scores?
So honestly, when it comes to standardized test scores, I'm assuming that we're talking about PSSAs or keystones. And to be honest, I don't put a ton of stock in those assessments. They're not necessarily the assessments that educators are looking at to drive instruction. And sometimes the reason why students aren't doing well in those tests are they're just not good test takers, which could be a level of anxiety with test taking. It could be just a variety of different things. What I would focus on, however, though, would be curriculum-based assessments or benchmark tests. So I would find out from my district, what do they use for benchmark tests, and find out where does my child fall on those benchmark tests. So those are usually identified as beginning, middle, or end of the grade year that your child is in. And they usually incorporate reading fluency, reading comprehension, and then math calculations, math concepts, and applications. So how are they monitoring your child throughout the school year to determine where they are in relation to their peers at grade level? And if there's holes in those assessments, then that's where we can dive a little deeper into those and say, what are the holes? How do we instruct in those areas? What goals need to be written based on those needs that are showing up during those curriculum-based assessments or benchmark assessments? So this to me would be, I wouldn't necessarily worry about the standardized test scores. I have a child who she's a freshman in high school and really just tanked on the PSSAs, but really could be in honors English, should be in honors English, didn't get into it because of the PSSA scores. But all of that to say, a student can be really talented in something, but they just can't show it through test scores. And we see that even in colleges, because colleges are moving toward test optional, because they also identify and recognize that a student can't just be, their ability can't be encapsulated in one assessment, one standardized test. So yes, we'd like to see everybody, at benchmark or proficient or above, but I wouldn't worry too much about those standardized test scores. What I would do is really look at the curriculum-based assessments and the benchmark assessments that are being conducted by your district. And if you don't know what those assessments are, certainly call up your teacher and find out, get a test, get a meeting with them, and ask them, how is it monitored? When is it monitored? What are my child's scores? If you get a bunch of percentiles that you don't understand, write back and say, I don't understand what you're sending me. I need more information. And they should be able to bring you in and discuss that with you, because it's really important as a parent for you to be informed about what the functioning level of your child. So definitely asking those questions would be important.
Anyone who has ever seen anything I posted before knows that I'm a big fan of saying, trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. So to this point, I just want to say that if your child's performance, whether that's their emotional performance or their grades or their test scores, if that's not matching what you know about their potential, which was the case in our case, there's so many things that can get thrown back at you as a reason why, like, oh, well, he just wasn't focused, or, oh, he just didn't take it seriously, or, oh, it was an online test. And I was told so many things and they all made sense in the moment, but it turned out none of that was what was going on. And there was something deeper. So just trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. Awesome. Okay. We are on to Michelle. And her child is 7 years old, and she's asking how to include neurodiverse goals for GLP / to include sensory needs or diet. That's for you, Melissa. I can't even figure out what GLP is, so I'm glad this is you.
So it took me some time, and I'm glad you sent this to me in advance. I was like, GLP, Gestalt Language Processor, I think, and that's how I'm going to answer the question. I don't know if that's how you read it
right.
too,
Thank
Dana.
you for looking into that.
So for anyone who doesn't know what a Gestalt Language Processor is.
Actually, Mom is here and in the chat, and she said, yes, that's correct.
Oh, good. Great. So Gestalt language processors acquire language in chunks. So where some might acquire language by learning a word in isolation. Others might, Gestalt language processors, learn in phrases, and then they break the phrase down to make sense of the individual words, rather than the opposite of learning the individual words and then putting the words together into phrases. So this is common in children who are neurodiverse. And so this parent's asking how to include neurodiverse goals. So I guess a hallmark for a Gestalt language processor is they will script or just they will do gestalts. And so a really important thing for the IEP team to understand and to be on board with is that all forms of communication should be honored. And it's mind-boggling the amount of early intervention teams that don't know this or understand this before parents or I go into a meeting and explain this to them, or aren't informed about Gestalt language processing. So it really is about bringing awareness to this type of language processing, and then informing the team. You have to be a really big advocate for your child, as Erica has said time and time again. And just they will write, compliance-based goals or non-neurodiverse affirming goals. So kind of going in with your idea of what you would like for your child. So I'm thinking, how can this be more neurodiverse affirming? I think the communication plan that comes along with your child's IEP is a really big piece in addition to the goals. So how are the adults that are working with your child responding to them when they are communicating? So we don't want them to be shutting down those gestalts or those scripts. We want them to be honoring them as the form of communication. We don't want them to be correcting your child. We want them to accept it as communication and continue on with their conversation as they would if your child spoke, "I want to go here," rather than a phrase that is a gestalt. And I think thinking about goals, if you focus on the skills you would like your child to acquire. So IEP teams really like to talk about conversation volleys. I don't know if you see this a lot, Dana. Like how many times back and forth a student can engage in a conversation, which is just stressful. I think if I were held to like how many back and forths I could have in a conversation with like not a topic that I was well versed in might be stressful for me. So maybe making the goal attainable, like a topic that your child is really interested in, or an adult that they are very familiar with, and maybe not focusing on the number of exchanges, but focusing on that speech output, and not conforming to those non-affirming practices. You really are just going to have to be an advocate for your child. I wish I had like a more concrete answer, but I think just kind of going in and educating the team on gestalt language processing and being a strong advocate for what you don't want to see. I have worked with a lot of families who have gestalt language processors who lean more neurodiverse affirming, who do not want hand over hand, who don't want the, the hierarchy, the prompt hierarchy, and we just take things out of the IEP. I'm not comfortable with this. What are you comfortable with that might achieve that same thing that the IEP team is kind of wanting to see? Or like, what is the skill we're trying to achieve here? And maybe thinking about a way that can be more affirming for the child. And then I think the second half of this question is include sensory needs and sensory diet. So the OT is really going to come in there and do an assessment and really make sure that that's followed through by everyone on the team and that your child has access to what they need throughout their day. I hope that answers the question.
I love that. Yes, that was really good. And now that I'm sort of at the, well, I don't want to say the end of the journey because I'm probably jinxing myself really hard, but further ahead in the journey, I have seen that a lot of what happens at IEP meetings and in IEP documents is very cookie cutter, and it uses like standard language and standard accommodations, and they just kind of throw it all in there. So it is okay. What I hear you saying is it's okay for parents to say like, that just doesn't work for my child, or my child is not comfortable. Like, we don't want that. It doesn't work. We need something else, or we need nothing, or whatever, to sort of try to guide them away from the very cookie cutterness of it. That's what I took from that. I hope is that like part of what you're saying?
Yeah. And you just kind of have to push a little bit. Like they will come in with their predetermined goals that they just copy and paste from some magical document that
Yes,
I know
it's a
they
lot
have
of copy and paste.
somewhere.
Yes. And so my other point that I always say, aside from trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut, is be the squeaky wheel, be the squeaky wheel, be the squeaky wheel. Don't be afraid to be annoying. Don't be afraid to speak up, to be bold, to push. That's part of why our journey was so long and brutal, is I was a much different person when this all started, and much quieter. I hadn't found my voice yet. I didn't like conflict. Don't do that. Just be louder, be more annoying. All right, I'm going to give a question to Dana and Melissa. There's a question from Stephanie in the chat. It has 2 or 3 parts if you want to take a peek at that. And I think you might already be familiar with their scenario. So I'm going to throw that question to you after this one for Dana. From Sweta or Sweta, I'm probably messing that up. I apologize. Her child is 17. She wants to know if the IEP can be carried over to college.
Okay, so IEPs are not carried over to college, but there are disability departments in each college that your child should go to let them know that they had an IEP. They can bring that over and provide that to the disability department, and they can then talk about the different kinds of accommodations that they feel that they might need in college. And I actually was on a webinar about this last school year, and there are people out there that probably know a whole lot more about this topic than I do in regard to what it looks like carrying things over into college. But what I did come up with from that conversation was making sure your child goes to the disability department, letting them know that they had an IEP, the kinds of accommodations they need. They did also mention that it's kind of up to the child to go to their individual teachers to let them know what their accommodations are, and that nobody goes in, there's no case manager that goes and spreads this, like, all of these accommodations a child needs to all of your professors in college. It's kind of up to the child to say, I might want my math professor to know that I need accommodations, but I don't necessarily need it in my gym class or what have you. So it really is a lot about the child advocating for themselves, which if you have younger ones that are in middle school and in high school and they don't advocate for themselves at that level, definitely talk to your team about getting some self-advocacy goals in there, because it's hugely important. So the other thing is, if your child comes to you at a high school, middle school level and says, so-and-so teacher didn't allow me to take my test outside of the room. What you should do, instead of just always going back, because we always want to fix things for our kids and we want to just make sure everything's right and they're getting it, what it is that they need. Also encouraging that child to email themselves, the teacher themselves, to say, I didn't want to say any, they're not going to necessarily always want to be out in front of their class saying, but I'm supposed to take this in the other room. But, if they're not comfortable doing that, having them advocate for themselves down after the test, or hey, I was supposed to be able to take that test in another room, and so wasn't able to get it done today because I didn't have my accommodation. Can we talk about how I can get that accommodation so I can get this test done? It's a really, really good skill for these students to have, so when they are in college they can advocate for themselves better. So that would be my answer to the college piece. Like I said, there are other people out there that really know the idiosyncrasies of transitioning to college better than I do. But that at a very high level, that's basically kind of what that looks like when you're transitioning to college. And then that same parent had also said, what happens when you don't agree with her recommendations? And Eric and I were talking, we're assuming that they're talking about the high school, so that the child is attending. And at any time you're not agreeing with the IEP or the recommendations from your IEP team, definitely bring that up. Like Erica said, be the squeaky wheel. Don't be afraid to rattle, the chains, or throw people off guard or make them feel uncomfortable. If you're not happy with the way that document looks, and when you're sitting at that IEP meeting, speak up, let them know this is not a goal that I think is appropriate, or something that I just dealt with. My child has had this goal for a few years in a row. Why are they still having the same exact goal? So speak up, make your concerns heard, and request that these changes be made to the IEP. If you get that IEP back and your suggestions and requests weren't honored, then the best thing that you can do is then when you get that notice of recommended educational placement, say that you do not agree, you want an informal meeting, and write specifically out, I requested X and the district did not add it into the IEP. I want this, that, and the other written in, and then you can have another meeting. If they still hold firm and they want to go toe to toe or say we absolutely are not doing this, then you can say you don't agree and ask for mediation. So there is a path forward. But I would also definitely, if you're in that situation and you feel like there are needs your child has that the district is poo-pooing or kind of sweeping away, or like Erica was saying, you feel like you constantly get all these reasonings as to why your child isn't doing well in certain areas. If you feel like you're being dismissed, call an advocate. Absolutely. I think that is the best way to go. I know my advocacy with Melissa Yelito and we do free consultations. So sometimes just being able to kind of zero in a little bit better on your situation or your scenario, talking to us one-on-one for that free consultation can really help us fine tune our responses to these questions, because these questions are great. But until we get a little bit more detailed information, we can kind of just give you a general idea as to how you can move forward. But if you get us on the phone, we're able to kind of ask a couple questions to narrow down specifically, what your next step should be.
That was awesome. Thank you. And I know as a parent, it can feel frustrating of like, just give me a specific answer. And I'm sure everybody understands why that can't always happen, but it's like why we're not supposed to go in Facebook groups and show a picture of our kid's rash and ask for medical advice, right? Because we can't possibly know all the variables enough about that child. So it's very similar. This is helpful to get you pointed in the right direction, but I strongly encourage, based off our own experience, and also because I know these two ladies, or three if we count Dr. Kristen Meyer, they're wonderful. They're so knowledgeable, and really nobody listened to me or listened to me well enough. And I really thought I could do this by myself, because of course I think I can do everything and I can be like sort of a badass when I put my mind to it. And I would show up at these meetings with like slideshows and data compared side by side. Like I was not playing around, and I still didn't get him what he needed. And the second there was someone else on my side of the table, everyone was like, wait, what? So I just strongly encourage you. First of all, I was overwhelmed and I was kind of depleted from the journey. So I was kind of being like less and less effective and more emotional, which doesn't really get you far. And just, do not hesitate to reach out, even if you're not sure that it's necessary for the situation or at that time. It doesn't hurt, like you said, Dana, to just take advantage of a complimentary consultation, run the scenario past someone with some more details, and just find out for sure. And Melissa, I know you're getting ready to answer Stephanie's multi-part question. Just a plug for anyone that helps with transition support. You touched on that, Dana, for this mom and the question you just answered. There are people out there that help with that. I recently added somebody to my team at Confident Parenting. So this mom can go to beaconfidentparent.com. Under the services tab, look for transition support. Erin Brown is my team member. She comes from the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. She's now a mom at home with little. So she's gone out on her own. She's not working for the OVR anymore. And she can do a lot of that hand holding that you were talking about, and helping with the self-advocacy piece, because of course for college, kids want to break away from their parents, and the parents don't maybe want to be on top of them, but they still need some of that scaffolding. So she can do a lot of that. She can help with the transition to employment, also the transition to post-secondary education, across an entire semester or more, with weekly check-ins and Zoom meetings, and kind of take over for that parent and then wean her support down. So don't be afraid to reach out to someone like Erin or anyone who offers that service.
To piggyback on that, if Kristen Meyer was here tonight, she would have all kinds of great information. In our business, I'm early intervention to middle school, because that was my expertise, and she was middle school to high school. So she actually has a full transition plan that she uses and works with parents and students. So awesome. You could still reach out to us. I would just shift you over to Kristen's calendar and not mine, because she would be the guru in that.
That's why we have teams, right?
Yes, it works very well for us, because we, the early intervention kiddo, she's like, yep, nope, those are you. So
right?
That's kind of how we handle that.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm glad my plug led back to your plug. Okay, so back to Melissa then, and I believe these questions from Stephanie are our last question. So if anyone that is here with us tonight has anything that hasn't been touched on, feel free to drop it in the chat, because we'll probably be wrapping up soon. Stephanie asked Melissa, what should an IEP team do if a child gets minimal progress on an IEP goal? For reference, the goal is a focusing goal. The goal is to be engaged for 10 minutes. He went from 2 minutes to 3 to 4 minutes. She follows that up with, what I do not know is how they're measuring what focusing looks like. I already have an email to the OT ready to go. I talked to the supervisor about my concerns. And then she has one more question after that, but I'll stop there. And if it's easier, Stephanie, I know you're here with us, so if you need or want to unmute, or Melissa, you want to chat directly to Stephanie, go for it.
And I know her, so this
and
is.
I'm so sorry.
I
saw that you were on here, and it's been like weighing on my mind. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna hop on and ask.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
here I
I'm
am.
so glad. I love last minute hop-ons.
Well, you're right, it's a terrible goal. I mean, so they don't define what focusing looks like at all for him or for the person collecting the data?
No. And
Okay.
that's my fault, but it was a
Not your
successful goal
fault.
for my younger son, and I didn't think about it because it was already successful. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be great. And it was not.
Okay. Um, so he made minimal progress. Did they, and this was a annual goal. Did they recommend any change in goal or they just carried it over, no change to instruction, accommodations, anything?
So it was at the end of the year. So when I saw it, I was like, well, everybody's gone now. So coming in, I was like, hey, we have a minimal progress. That means we have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to kind of like make sure, because that's what my school does. Like if you get minimal progress, something has to change because then
Really? Yeah.
it's not effective. But I just wanted, coming from my district, who was so amazing, and working with North Penn as a parent, I don't always know if what my school does is the law or it's just really good practice.
Well, it's an annual goal for a reason. The goal is for him to meet it with within that year. There, of course, is a little bit of buffer, but it seems like he's not very close, and it's also doesn't seem like a very specific, measurable goal. So I would be curious, one, how this could be rewritten in a way that, I mean, I think later on you said he's the third grader, right?
Yeah.
He should be taking some more responsibility for this, self-monitoring himself possibly if he has that ability. So we need to really define what this looks like for him. Um, uh, and how are they supporting him in making progress on this goal?
You're in the hot seat. You're on the spot.
Yeah, sorry, I
I
have
know
lots of
that's really hard and we appreciate you. Take a minute to think.
I honestly don't know. I know that focus was a concern for the teacher, and this is the goal my other son had in
yeah,
kindergarten. And so I was like, if this is a concern, why isn't it a goal? And they were
okay.
like, oh, that's so true. Let's just put in, like, Roman's goal is working. Let's just put that in. And me, I would it's so funny because I'm a teacher, and so you'd
What did
think
I
I was
say
like,
about cookie cutter? And I mean, I'm not blaming you, Stephanie. It's not on
I
you to realize
know.
that.
It's always so scary. I feel like if anybody else asks me a question about an IEP, I can be like, oh, the blah 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 blah. My kids, I got nothing. So it's really hard. That's why we have Melissa.
We can chat about this offline too, Stephanie.
Yeah.
This definitely needs to be
But
resolved.
something needs to be done.
Yes,
If
yes.
and it's not that was not the annual, like that was just like 3 months in to that new goal. But I guess my question really is, if a child is making minimal progress, we don't just like sit on it. We change it and
If
like
it-
scaffold or
Oh,
change.
they could sit on it and then leave themselves open to, you know, comp ed or other things down the road. But at the expense of your son, which we don't
Yeah.
want either. So yeah, we want to make sure we address it.
So I'm right in pushing that, like,
Yes.
hey, we gotta. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And
Um,
and just to take the blame off you, Stephanie, that you seem to be like putting on yourself, which is something I do too. I wish I could talk to myself like I talk to other moms. Before my son was born, I, pregnant, drove to Connecticut by myself, stayed with friends of friends, and took a 5-day breastfeeding certification course. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect timing. I'm going to like, we are not going to struggle. I'm going to know everything. And I remember them saying at the class, like, you can't counsel yourself. Like literally someone has to look from the outside and look in at how you're positioned and what, but you can't see it from where you are. Plus you're exhausted and you're emotional and blah, blah, blah. And of course, me, because I'm like, whatever I am, I was like, we had a horrible time. We had a really, really, really hard time. And I did have to bring someone in to look at it. And I just was thinking about that as you were sharing, like saying all the things you were saying. Like, first, I wanted to give you a big hug. It's not on you. And second of all, like, yeah, you just can't, even if you were an advocate yourself, you would still probably need an outside, level-headed, non-emotional person. That's all. That's what my 2 cents about that. I think I stepped on you,
Thank
Melissa.
you.
Were you done that part of Stephanie's question?
No, I was.
All right, awesome. I don't know, Dana, Melissa had a long turn. Do you have anything to add to that? Do you want to keep going? Because there's another part of, there's an ARFID part.
Not really,
of
no.
Stephanie's
I mean, I
question. Okay.
think Melissa kind of touched on, it's a very cookie cutter goal. And so what looks like focusing to one person might not look like focusing to the other person. And what focusing might look like for your son, it might look different for another student. So it needs to be personalized a little bit more. And they need to kind of get in there and dig in a little bit to say, you know, what is he paying attention to? Maybe he's fidgeting a lot, but that's actually helping him pay attention. So I think that there's just a ton of variables there that it needs to get a little more personalized. They need to dig a little deeper to find out, you know, how to support him to make sure he's accessing and hearing the education. And then if he's not, then, you know, what do they need to do to kind of allow that to be, allow him to pay attention. So is it a sensory thing? Is it that some of the information's too hard? But until they get down to the nitty gritty as to why exactly this is happening, it's not something he's just going to do all of a sudden on his own because he's expected to. We've got to figure out, you know, what the reason is. So, you know, number one, is he attending, and how much is he hearing and learning? And then also, if there are gaps that he's not learning, we've got to figure out why. So,
He's
you know,
hearing
again,
it
like,
all. They just don't like the way it looks. You know how it goes.
right.
Yeah.
And then in which case, you know, the goal to be the goal for school is to learn and to be educated and to understand what's happening and be able to apply your knowledge. And so if he's doing those things, then, you know, maybe the focusing goal maybe he doesn't even need a goal in focusing. Maybe we need to look at the SCI section and say, what are some things that are going to allow, you know, maybe he's distracting potentially to students around him. So then it's kind of the onus is on them then to say, does he need fuzzy underneath his desk? Does he need something to kick on his seat? You know, and that's where you could talk to the OT and say, you know, what are some other things we could do? Is it a weighted vest? But again, a lot more digging deeper, I think, to kind of fine tune this. Yeah.
And
It
I
goes
don't think
back
it
to
was
that-
unreasonable to say like, oh, well, what works for that works so well for my other son. Like that
They
makes
have the
sense
same
from a parent
diagnoses, you know, it's so funny.
perspective. But but you've tried it and it's not helping enough. So like we need something else. You might as well stay on, Stephanie, because the next question is also yours, which is fine. And it's back to we have a lot of ARFID questions tonight.
Different kid, Melissa.
Okay. So first things first, different kid. This is a 6-year-old. What responsibility does the district have to ensure that a child eats? I don't know the answer to this either. My 6-year-old is suspected ARFID, autistic, ADHD, anxiety. He has a one-to-one helper at lunch, but he still barely eats. We've added snack times, but it happens sometimes and not others. He went down 22 percentile points in his weight in kindergarten, gained it back and more by just literally eating normal meals over the summer. School says we can't force him to eat, but they can remind him to take a bite, right?
Is your pediatrician concerned?
Say that again.
Is your pediatrician concerned?
Yes, the developmental pediatrician was concerned. Now, that was the very last day of school. We saw them the last time. And since then he went from 46.5 to like 51 pounds in 2.5 months, which is also probably unhealthy, but we'll just move on from that. So
I mean,
like,
you did a good job over the summer.
but like it's not like me even forcing food because he doesn't eat anything. It's just like him eating what like a typical, it's just like a goldfish bag a day. It's pretty much. What?
Okay. I'm wondering
And he's not
if
missing
you
his snacks.
if you could like approach it from the medical standpoint and have the doctor write a note like saying that he had, or you're saying it's suspected.
Yeah, so she because we talked about it at the last appointment, and I brought it up, and she goes, that's very possible. And she's very much like, it doesn't matter what it is, we have to treat the symptoms. And the symptoms are he doesn't eat anything but like 4 or 5 things, and he's not eating at school.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think maybe, is there like any plan in place about, like where he's eating, what they're offering to him? Like, are they like, does he respond to any sort of like motivators or incentives or anything like that?
he could absolutely like respond to like a home, like, oh, 10 extra minutes on your iPad, you know, kind of thing. I think that may actually be motivating to him. But we send in everything for him. And he was sort of like maintaining-ish. And then like the last 3 weeks of school happened and everything's crazy. The schedule's different. And he didn't get that extra little like snack in the morning. And he won't eat anything quick. And I feel so bad. I see another ARFID mom in the comments. It's a very stressful thing for us parents because we just want our babies to
I'm
eat.
hoping you two unite after this and can stay,
Oh,
good
I
friends.
would love to. I would love
Me
to.
Yes,
talk to her
Nicole
about
meet
it.
Stephanie, Stephanie meet Nicole.
Yeah.
I love it.
Hi. I don't know if you
Yeah.
could see me. I'm in the dark.
I'm not an advocate. I'm not an expert on ARFID in any way, but like Melissa, maybe you can answer this. Do like longer, slower transitions ever help, or having the ability to eat in a quieter, less overwhelming space, or like?
And I will say real quick, we have discussed with the school like eating in another space, but then it like hinders his social, and then that's problem with like the autism. So like it's such a hard thing. And with his rigidity, if his friends aren't eating, it's not eating time. I don't eat now. Nobody's eating right now. So like he has a personalized schedule that changes daily for him. And they have been able to like add like, oh, Roman's snack time. And then they're like, he's like, I'm not eating. And they'll be like, no, look, it says Roman's snack time, 9:50 or whatever it is. And he's better, but just, but 22 percentile points, and he's not going to be able to stay on his ADHD medication if he continues to decline. And then he's going to bite and lick walls and lick his shoes and all the fun stuff that we deal with.
Yeah, that's really tricky. I would say he has an IEP. I
Mhm.
would say just get a written plan. Do you have like a written plan in place, or are you just kind of like, this is just flexible and you're?
It just says for snack time, it just says that he will have a snack upon like entry to the classroom.
Okay. I would see if you can put a written plan in place. I would put in your parental concerns that you are very concerned that he is not eating in school, that last school year he dropped 22 percentile points, that he was able to gain the weight back over the summer, and that you would like to see him maintain the weight this school year, but it's very important that he eats the food that you're sending into school. And I don't know, I would maybe schedule a meeting with the team the first like 4 weeks of the school year to just kind of see how things are going and kind of go from there. And I'm
By
happy
written
to.
plan, do you mean like from the doctor doing like a health plan?
So if there's no diagnosis, I don't know if the doctor will do that. I was just saying
Well,
the school team should
pretty
have.
good.
Okay.
She might.
Okay.
She's very concerned and sees, how good this is for him, but
If she's willing, I mean, that would help.
okay.
I was saying the school should have some sort of plan in writing so that
Okay.
everyone knows what is happening when.
Okay.
And that way it's concrete and it could be adjusted, and there's like a clear timeline of we tried this, we tried this, we tried this.
Okay. Perfect.
I don't know if you have anything else to add, Dana.
Sorry, wow, it took me a minute to get to my mute button. I mean, I don't really I don't think so. I think it's tough. I mean, I've had some families with eating issues where they just want to know what was eaten and what wasn't. So I don't know if that's something that matters to you to know. Here, what I sent in with him, I want to make sure you guys don't throw it out, that I am able to see exactly how much of what I sent in with him was eaten. So then you can know if he needs extra supplements when he gets home. But I definitely agree with Melissa in regard to having some kind of plan, who's responsible for what, and what they can encourage him to eat or intake at certain times of the day, and who's responsible for it. So is it the lunch person? Is it the person who's giving the AM snack? Is it the person who's giving the PM snack? Kind of just making sure everybody is on the same page as far as what their responsibility is in the feeding piece.
Okay. No,
And I'm
that's good.
assuming, same thing with behavior. It's kind of like how you frame it with him, right? It's the phrasing
Yep.
that they're going to be using is going to be very important. And if it's different adults working with him, it needs to be consistent across the board.
Great. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are about Nicole. I'm going to be listening in.
Yeah, right. Let's stay on the topic of ARFID. I feel like we actually did an ARFID webinar tonight, but hopefully for those of you with kids struggling with that and you struggling with helping them with that, like obviously we're here to know that we're not alone. So you certainly are not. Nicole, I'll read your question out so you don't have to frame it all over again, but then feel free to be off mute and weigh in. Nicole said, my child is 8, was diagnosed with ARFID, the eating disorder. I have him in an eating outpatient program. It's almost done. I wonder if I should get the IEP. He's going to 3rd grade. I wonder if it's worth getting the IEP or speaking directly to teachers, nurses, if and when he may need more food breaks. I have an OT referral, and this work may help him with having sensory issues around food. Also want to say he's a great student, social, repeats meals at lunch some days of the week. That might be a typo, so you can clarify, or maybe I read it wrong. All his friends are very nice to him about his diet.
So he's in a particularly good place in social with his friends. He may be hungry, but he'll mask it at school, and then he'll be a monster at home. So it's I'm wondering, as school progresses and grades get higher and anxiety gets more, is it worth getting the IEP when he's diagnosed now versus later on? When, of course, a growing child is growing in different ways. I can't, say he'll lose weight or gain it yet. He has a very strong diet of the things that he likes, but it's the carbs, it's the sugars. It's not the healthiest diet, but we're working on that. And the eating program has been very educational and knowledgeable for me and my husband to both be on the same page and know what he's facing every day. But the eating program diagnosed him with ADHD, but it was very light diagnosis. She met with him for 2 hours and said, I think he has ADHD, and I could write a letter and do an IEP. I just don't know if I should take it right now until there's a reason to until he loses weight.
Dana, do you want to answer? Do you want me to answer? I know I've been talking a lot.
Sure, I can pop in. So unless what's happening with him medically is impacting him academically, then it would be hard to get an IEP. So typically when students are being evaluated, they're being evaluated based on what the impact their diagnosis has on their education. So sometimes we have students that have ADHD that have a 504 because they just need some accommodations to be successful, but they don't necessarily need replacement instruction or direct instruction or goals. And so the team ends up writing a 504. And so a 504 has just the accommodation pieces on it. So that means if your child just needs to eat in a different location, or they need things repeated, or things that can be easily tackled just by a couple different accommodations, a child sometimes will just get the 504. So, it's up to you as a parent whether or not you would want the school to move forward with a diagnosis for the ADHD, because that is something that you mentioned that he does have that diagnosis. And so schools are able to do evaluations for ADHD if it's impacting him academically. But you can, just because you're asking for an evaluation now, and if you don't get an IEP now, doesn't mean that in a year from now, things are getting more intense, his anxiety is increasing, and you find it is impacting him more. You can ask for an evaluation again. A lot of the evaluations, they won't do twice, and that's more for the specific testing that the child's going through. So there are some standardized tests that are done when a child's getting evaluated that can only be done once a year, or else the test is invalid. But when you're looking at something like ADHD, a lot of that is more kind of done via behavioral rating scales. And so those can be done as many times as needed, really. So, a couple parts to your question. You can get could request now and still request in a year from now. It doesn't mean that you could never request again. If they find him eligible, they find him eligible, and then they'll put some things in place. But you could also go with an outside diagnosis with ADHD, send a letter and say that you would like to talk about your child getting a 504, and that's something that you could get in place rather quickly. So, a couple layers to it, but in regard to the RFID, if you're looking at just the RFID for the IEP, it's unlikely that, unless again, it's impacting him in some kind of academic way, socially, behaviorally, it's unlikely that he would get an IEP, but not knowing, the full profile of your child, it's kind of hard to say. Other than a blanket statement that unless it's impacting him academically in some way, it would likely be maybe a 504.
Mhm. I think I might hold off and just wait and see. It just seems like we're just getting our feet wet with the eating program. We're gonna be released like butterflies on our own and figure out how to make it work in our home. So I think I want to see how that goes before I jump into other hoops. Because I think
And-
all of it, getting the diagnosis, getting ADHD diagnosed, all of this is very impacting on a parent all at once. So until you get used to it and you let it simmer out and you just fan it out a bit, then I think you could attack other areas that you are questioning at the time, if it changes.
And know that a 504
Absolutely.
plan, you'll send in the documentation for the medical diagnosis, and you should be able to get a meeting pretty quickly for that and get those accommodations in place if you were looking for, more frequent snacking and things like that related to the RFID diagnosis. So it's not as extensive of a process of, waiting 60 days for a comprehensive evaluation and then 30 days for an IEP to be developed. The 504 should be pretty quick if you do decide to go that route.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. You guys are amazing. I think that was all. No, I don't think. I know because I checked. Those were all the questions we received in advance and all the questions that we received in the chat. Thank you to everybody who attended live. Check the chat before you drop off. There is a link to where this will be posted in the video library that I've been curating for parents to try to make life easier. That's at specialneedscollective.com. In addition to the video library, there's a blog, an events calendar, a provider directory, also a chat with an advocate page where you can connect with both Melissa and Dana and Kristen. Also, if you aren't a member of our Facebook group, Mainline and Philly Parents of Neurodivergent Kids, I just forgot the name of my own Facebook group. That's okay. It's been a long week. Love to have you there. We are doing virtual support groups facilitated by experts, parent coaches, autism experts, and myself. I'm just there for moral support. We've had 3 so far, and they've been amazing. Parents are making personal connections, getting their kids together and getting themselves together in real life, which is so important. Being in a Facebook group is nice, but actually making real life connections with people more than just a thumbnail and a post is what it's really all about. I am happy to help anybody in any way I can. So feel free to send me a Facebook message, send me an email. I have an amazing network of professionals that I'm connected to personally and professionally, and I can always get you to someone that can help or can at least point you in the right direction. I will also email everyone with this recording. Also, I just wanted to say to Nicole, Melissa did answer your original question at the very beginning before you popped on. So just make sure you go back to the beginning of the recording because I don't think you heard her whole response.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Awesome. I did want to try to keep it to an hour and we didn't do too badly. So I think we will wrap it up here. I'm sure we'll want to do another one of these once the school year actually starts. Also, Melissa, Megan commented that she had a meeting today and you represented them and, you know, she had a really nice experience. So that was lovely. I was actually seeing her post a positive thing about you in a group and I was like, I'm live with her right now. Come join us. So, it really is a community. And that's what we are going for. So yes, take all of their advice, find them if you need them, trust your gut, be the squeaky wheel. I really, really hope that somebody who needs to hear this hears it. We can all learn from each other. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to suffer in silence. And I wish that someone could have shared this information with me sooner. So that's my mission. Thank you so much, Melissa and Dana, for your time, especially stepping in at the last moment. And I think we will sign off here and we'll be back soon. Thanks to everyone for watching live and watching later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.